I just hope this session helps people understand a bit more about research and how we can get involved as young medical students or fresh medical graduates. Okay. So, welcome everyone. I am Maanini Singhvi, as I've introduced myself already. Today, I just want to be talking to you about letter to the editor and how it's one of the types of publications that journals are accepting. There's a pyramid that I would just like to allude to before we start. At the top of the pyramid is the most prestigious type of research that you can be doing, and that is definitely randomized control trials, then meta analysis and systematic reviews. Then come all your original articles and research papers. Below that are your case reports and brief commentaries and communications with the editors. Even below that are your letters to the editor. They are at the bottom of the pyramid because it's considered the simplest type of publication, where many times you're just trying to either critique somebody else's work, point out a simple research phenomenon or something that you have observed. The whole letter to the editor is just around 250 to 300 words sometimes. Some journals obviously allow you to go above that, like 800 words, 500 words, so on. But so just an introduction to that pyramid, we'll make a WhatsApp group with everyone and I'll share that picture of that pyramid. So you can work your way up. Right now, start with letter to the editor, understand how to publish and everything. And following that, you can move your way up and even publish systematic reviews and meta analysis. And then who knows, maybe in the future, even go on to RCTs. So, yeah. So, my presentation is titled From Thought to Print. From thought being whatever you have thought about writing to the editor, and to print, obviously, referring to the publication aspect of it. Okay. So, this is the overview. We want these things to be discussed today. I'm going to give you a brief introduction. Then we'll talk about the types of letters, then the objective of writing a letter, then the entire process of writing itself, which applies to not just letters, but also to the other types of publications which I've mentioned. Then there's something that you need to be aware of, which is called as predatory journals. Following that, I'll just show you a brief of my publications. I will also be sharing the letters and articles which I have published, so you can just get an idea. Following that, we'll have a take-home message and a conclusion. Okay. Coming to the introduction, a letter to the editor in medical journals, it can take several forms. You can have a commentary on a published article, as I've already mentioned, a new perspective on certain topics, like maybe a new drug, for example, Ozempic or something has come in the market, and you want to write about some side effects of it or something, and you you've seen a particular phenomenon happen in a patient where it's a very rare adverse effect or something, and you want to bring that to light, especially since the drug or the phenomenon is very new. You want to bring that to light. That is also something worth mentioning or commenting on. So, yeah, that kind of letter. And brief research reports. Suppose you have been using some sort of device, a medical device, such as a scan machine or something, and you have found certain flaws in that machine, and you have used a certain software to override or do some of your own research or something. In that case, you can write about the way you worked around the particular machine, the flaw that you found, and the way you worked around it. Yeah, if you're writing a perspective or a commentary on an existing published article in the journal, then you can take any stance. You can agree with the article's results, you can disagree, you can compliment that, oh, yes, I have also seen something similar. So, a letter serves a lot of different purposes, and this was just an introduction on what that purpose is. So the types of letters are response letters, case reports, brief reports on certain methodologies, commentary letters, and critiques or rebuttals. Many times we'll start with response letters. So many times, if you have already published an original article or something, and a certain group of people have decided that there is some flaw in your research work, and they've written to you and they've gotten published in the journal, they've written to you about, okay, these are things that you could have improved on. In that case, what you will be writing to them is a response letter. Also, sometimes the editor of a particular journal will ask for invitations. They'll invite people, invite expert opinions in certain matters. So that's covering the response letter. Then you have case reports. So, for example, case reports might not always get published as case reports. So sometimes I might have an article on, I might have seen in one particular journal, in a medicine journal, suppose, an article on Wilson's disease. Now, what I have found on, about Wilson's disease is something completely different. Like, I found a completely different presentation. Then, in that case, I can write a letter to that particular journal saying that, oh, I read this article of yours, but I found a case with these findings. That can be a case report published as well. Brief reports on research methodology. As I already mentioned, suppose you have a machine or some a scanning, suppose you use a CT machine or an MRI machine, and you found a flaw with that, and you found a software also that corrects that flaw or a very rare finding. In that case, you can describe your experience with that via a letter. Commentary letters, we've already discussed. Most letters are commentary letters where we are writing a review of the article which we have read and things that could be done better in prospective future letters. And in these commentary letters, you are describing the limitations of the article, which they may not have noticed. So, in every original article or a research paper, there will be a section in the conclusions where they are required to describe what limitations their paper had. And suppose they have not discussed certain limitations, in that case, you can always cover that in your letter. So, the objective of a letter, I always like to believe that a journal is a conversation between the readers and the contributors. Contributors being the editors, the writers, the commonly published writers. So, as it's a conversation, you actually want to facilitate that conversation, and your letter should always add to that instead of being completely different or completely detached from the scope of the entire journal. You should focus on finding a journal that is absolutely the right fit. That right fit is very important. Suppose I am writing to a cardiology journal or something. I need to make sure that whatever I am submitting to them is not something completely unrelated. It has to be within their scope. Suppose that cardiology journal likes focusing on pacemakers and the latest advancements. In that case, I should not write to them about vasculitis and vascular diseases or something. If that journal is focusing on pacemakers and latest advancements in electrical conduction and those things in the heart, then I should not be writing to them about something completely unrelated, even though it is CVS, but I'm not writing to them about that. Also, that scope sometimes is very difficult to understand. Yes, it sounds very simple when I'm describing it like this, but when you actually sit and look at what exactly a journal, so that's why it's important to be a reader of articles before you start writing. Secondly, I believe that a letter to the editor is a modality for avid readers of the journal to communicate with favorite writers and editors. Now, for example, if there's an expert who I really admire and they are sitting in a very fancy institute abroad, suppose Johns Hopkins or something. Obviously, as a young researcher, I don't have the resources, neither the competency to match that level of that sort of researcher. But the only way that I can bring myself to the same forum as that person is probably by writing to them. And that manifests as a letter. For example, I would want to tell them that, okay, these are some things that I wish you would consider. And these are things that I'm really interested in or I'm really interested about. That exchange manifests as a letter. Because obviously, sitting here with the resources that they have access to versus what I have access to, I definitely don't think that we can match that level of research. So maybe I won't get the same original article published as they would, but I can get a letter published in a similar forum as their original article or their systematic review. It's a great letter, especially when you sit down and write a letter and you're trying to critique an existing original article. What you learn out of it and what the mistakes that other researchers have made, when you are thinking about those mistakes and writing about it, chances are in the future, when you are an established researcher or a clinician, you won't repeat those same mistakes. So it's a very good way to start off research as a young researcher or a young clinician. Now let's talk about the process of writing. So the writing process starts, this is the very standard process: pre-writing, then drafting, followed by the entire revising, then editing, and then publishing. For example, you will have a pre-writing session. First, you have to select the right journal. We'll talk about that in a bit. Selecting the right journal, then selecting the right article, following which you have to pre-write. Now, pre-writing is a very, I like to think of it as a brainstorming session. You are just taking a pen and paper or notes app or whatever you prefer and just writing down what are the mistakes, like in very crude, your own language. You just have to write what are the mistakes, what are things that this person could have done better. In that process, don't scratch out any of your ideas. All ideas are valid in that stage. Following that, we have the drafting stage. Now, this is where you're putting your ideas into paragraph format. You have to sit alone, focus on what you're writing, and put together paragraphs that, okay, my first paragraph is just to the introductory part. The second paragraph is going to talk about one point. Third paragraph is about the second point, so on. And fourth paragraph is about the limitations or something like that. And fourth or fifth paragraph is the conclusion. Following this, you revise. Now, in the revision stage, you are removing a lot of redundant sentences, repetitive things. If you have a tendency to use very crude language, these terms are not really good in terms of research papers. Like, they're not the most formal language. So, these kind of things, redundant sentences, repetitive sentences, which are just not adding to the main core, and you'll just remove those things. Secondly, after revising, you have the whole editing process. This is the process you need to follow when you're doing it for yourself. This is just before you submit your article itself. These are the stages that you have to go through. Following that, you will edit your article, make it short, stick to the word limit, ensure that you have all your documents, your cover letter, and everything ready. Following this, you submit. And if the submission works out, of course, it'll lead to a publication. Now, many times the journals will help you with this process. After the drafting stage, many of us choose to submit to the journal. We submit our letter to the journal. Now, the journal, if it's a good letter, they will have their editorial team review it. If it passes that editorial stage, it'll go to peer review. In peer review, it's a blinded process. So, other people who are your peers, they will get to see the peers, as in they are subject matter experts. They will see that letter or they'll go through the initial article and everything, and they'll formulate an opinion. They'll also give suggestions. Many times their suggestions are literally even better than what we initially write. So always listen to the peer reviewers. They're definitely going to give you very good content on how to improve your. The most amount of learning will happen at that revision stage. Journals give back something called major and minor revisions. So after you are done with the drafting stage, you will submit. Journals will send back for the revising stage. Major revisions will be like complete revamping of certain paragraphs or certain details and wrong sentences outright. Whereas minor revisions will be some few sentences here and there that you can remove, or some formatting problem or something like that. Following all your peer review, and once that gets through, the journal themselves, they'll send back a letter saying, congratulations, you have been accepted for publication. Now, whatever you need to do after that is they'll give you the instructions on to do after that. But the writing process, I think, is the key to the entire letter to the editor writing part. It's not just for letter to the editor. I think this flowchart that I've put up, it applies to every element in that pyramid, which I spoke to you about in the beginning. Moving on, I wanted to discuss with everybody about predatory journals. These are journals which you want to totally avoid. You do not want to get involved with them at all. So, predatory journals are deceptive publications that falsely present themselves as scholarly journals, and they often exploit the open access publishing model. There are three models which I can touch upon today. One is open access, which means that if it's available in the public domain, it's for free for everyone to access. Just by Googling, I can access the article that you have published as a medical author. Secondly, you have the subscription based model. The journal offers an open access. Suppose you are the author who's publishing. Now, I pay a certain amount to the journal to publish my article that will be published via open access. But if I'm not willing to pay as a writer, then the publication will go into institutional access. So only those people who have access to the journal's entire library, or they're paying for the subscription of that journal, only those people will be able to access your article. That's a hybrid sort of model. And the other one is completely subscription. So that journal doesn't offer any open access at all. You have to free for the writer, but for readers to be able to read it, they'll have to pay the subscription fees. Now, predatory journals are, they'll offer to publish for, they'll be like, you send us articles, we'll publish for free. They are not going to even scrutinize or even look at your work. Even the worst type of manuscripts get published by these journals. They are just looking to make money. And so here's how it works. Like, I submit a manuscript to them. They will reply to me in a matter of 2 or 3 days. I'll be extremely happy. Oh my God, they are accepting my paper so fast. And is it that great a paper that they're accepting so fast? And many times they're not indexed on PubMed, they're not indexed on Google Scholar, even Scopus, anywhere. They are going to accept your article quickly, then within 1 or 2 weeks, they'll start asking you for money to publish open access. Now, this is very exploitative, and they'll literally use words like, we'll blacklist you from everywhere if you don't pay up or something like that. So, you want to avoid such journals. And there's a very famous list available online. It's called Beale's List. It was compiled by a man named Jeffrey Beale. He put together a list of all the predatory journals, and I will share that link with you. So every time that you're looking at a journal that, okay, I want to submit my article here, you should just go through that list and make sure that the journal you're submitting to is not listed on there. And many times, if you go through legitimate publishers, like for example, Springer Nature, Wiley, you are likely not going to encounter a predatory journal. If you have any questions at this point, please let me know. This thing, predatory journals, many times they don't even have a proper peer review process. Within 2 or 3 days, they'll tell you that your article has been accepted. And even after you publish in a legitimate good journal, these people somehow find your email and they'll send emails like, congratulations, you've been selected for this conference. Your paper was brilliant to read and our peers loved it. So just like how they're predatory journals, they're predatory conferences also. And yeah, one more thing, they mimic established journals. So many times they'll use names like New England Journal of this or something. They're going to use name like World Journal of Pediatrics, and they're going to try to mimic some very good journals so that you feel that you've been accepted by a significant place. So I think we've covered everything here. They don't have a peer review, a very good peer review process. They are very aggressive in their solicitation. They'll send emails left and center. There's no transparency about how, when your article went through, how it got published. They mimic established journals. There's no indexing on PubMed or anything. So the safest way for you to select a journal is to go on established publishers' websites and see the journal of your interest. For example, I'll go for Springer Nature or Elsevier, and I'll search medicine journals because I like medicine. So If you're into OBG, you can select an OBG journal. You go to that publisher, select OBG journals, and go that way. Am I audible? Hello? Somebody raised their hand, I think. Okay. Then I.
Hello, Sakshi. Am I audible to you?
Yes.
Actually, I want to pose a question. Why was my research work done by mistake? Affect my CV or not?
Okay. Yeah. This is one more question. Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. So if you've
Did you
submitted
hear
to a.
my question?
Yes, I did. It was about accidentally submitting to a predatory journal, correct?
Yes, yes.
It will not affect your CV lightly. You don't have to include it on your CV actually. If you feel like it was a mistake, then yeah, just don't include it on your CV. I do believe that they do a strict background checking. If you're especially applying for USMLE or something, they definitely will do that. But it's not going to significantly affect you. Just don't count it as a publication. That would be my suggestion. And many times, even young researchers in the US, they claim that they've published in places which they should not have, and they're not very proud of that. But US requires a certain number of publications. So out of sheer desperation, many times they publish in places they're not very proud of. And predatory journals capitalize on that emotion of students. So please be aware of these journals. And if you choose not to include it on your CV, that's perfectly fine. If you choose to also, that is fine, but just remember it's not going to get you any brownie points from them. Yeah, it's up to you whether you want to include it on your CV or not. Yeah. So these are just some of my publications. You can just have a look at the titles. I will be sharing one or two of them with you, just so that like you can get an idea of how to write a letter. All of them are commentaries on existing articles in the journals. And I try to target impact factors above two. 2 to 5. 5 has been my highest so far, which was European Journal of Neurology. And they have a completely open access model. So they charge every writer to publish there, but only letters are not chargeable. Every other article or manuscript type, you have to pay. We're almost reaching an end to this. So the take home message here is your goal can never be publication. Your goal should be, how do I understand research better as a student, as a future clinician, and maybe even a future researcher. So your goal should be building a scientific spirit of inquiry and just contribute to medicine. When your mindset is about research, I think publications will follow. It's never about getting the publication itself. You have to stay vigilant about predatory elements, and you have to be open to revising your work. You should not be, oh my God, I've just spent so much of my energy writing this letter. Now I can't do any more work. That's not, or even for that matter, any manuscript. It should never be like that. You should be open to revising your work because you'll get to learn a lot. The more open you are to criticism and the more open you are to editors pointing out mistakes and sending you even major revisions, the more you learn. Now, choosing the right journal, I've just touched upon this very briefly because I don't see a point in telling everybody here how to choose a journal because everybody will have a different interest. My interest would be pediatrics or general medicine. Somebody else might like OBG. For that, I'll just suggest that you go to a particular publisher's website like Elsevier, Wiley, etc. Just search up the subject of your interest on their search bar. Go for OBG journals, you'll see articles, you'll see what kind of mistakes those articles are making. Take your time, take 1 or 2 days, read the article in its entirety, and see what mistakes they have made and what you would suggest them to improve on. Many times, a lot of the articles that are published in the West don't take socioeconomic standing or socioeconomic status of the patient into account at all because all of their patients are from a relatively good socioeconomic status. Here in India, we actually suffer from a huge disparity. Like, for example, our socioeconomic status, if we don't take that into account in our researches, then we are literally missing out a huge element, because the lower socioeconomic status class does not have access to all the resources that an upper middle class or a middle class person would have. So that is a very important. And suppose we're talking about Parkinson's disease and risk of falls or something. In that case, you have to consider socioeconomic status, because the people who are of lower socioeconomic status obviously will have a worse prognosis of their condition. They will be suffering more falls. They will not have access to the same healthcare and resources. So many articles in the West, one common thing that we often speak about in letters is socioeconomic status, because the Western people do not consider it. And that's why many times their research is not applicable to the Indian context. In the Indian context, we only seek to apply the guidelines that the West has set, but we never apply their research per exactly per se, because our income disparity and everything is huge in this country. And actually that makes the Indian patient population very interesting, because why you can see a variety of prognosis for the same condition just because of the different access to resources, if I made sense in that. Okay, coming to the conclusion, a letter to the editor is a short and effective way for readers to interact with experienced researchers and editors. By maintaining a spirit of inquiry and just seeking to learn, I think you will do really well. Be open to major, minor revisions, and always focus on prospective research, I feel. Retrospective articles are very lazy. I think many articles people published original articles are retrospective. You can find a lot of mistakes in them, because you'll see that retrospective articles work with data that they've already. Suppose if I'm doing a COVID study now, it will be retrospective because COVID happened 4 5 years back. So I will be going into retrospective data, and I'll see whatever data is available. Based on that, I'll make a research paper. So obviously, I am limited by the amount of data that is available. So I'll be ignoring certain variables. I'll make some mistakes. If you find a retrospective article online, you'll see that there are errors. Even after you move past letter to the editor, you'll be doing original articles and everything. So I feel like you definitely will find a lot of scope in like prospective research, because you will be creating the entire data from scratch. If you go for retrospective study, the data is already available, and that's not a that's almost, I feel like retrospective articles personally are very lazy. So yeah, if you're writing a letter, they're great because I can criticize a retrospective article very easily. Prospective articles are a challenge to criticize because authors have considered a lot of variables.